you would think that employing a veteran, you're going to get someone that's loyal, that's committed, that's courage, has got discipline, has got standards. And that's exactly what you get. And I think there's a real opportunity to educate hiring managers that's what you get when you're employing a veteran.
Welcome back to The Responsible Edge, the podcast exploring how to balance profit with purpose in an increasingly complex world. I'm Charlie Martin, your host and founder of TrueMark, and our article this week is titled After Service, the Hidden Costs of Britain's Military on its Veterans, which is a 2026 report that shows how legal promises on veteran support often break down in real life, right at the moment people leave the forces. And I'm absolutely thrilled to say that I've got a real expert in terms of lived experience in the room today to unpack all of this in Jim Holland, founder and CEO of Carma, a veteran-led climate partner and a former Royal Navy weapons engineer who has lived the transition from uniform to civilian life. Jim, it's absolutely brilliant to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time.
Charlie, it's fantastic to be here on The Responsible Edge. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Oh, top man. Well, I've been looking forward to this one for quite some time. There's going to be some serious energy in the room, I feel, with you and I when we get together and have this conversation. Now, Jim, I very briefly introduced you and your work, or sort of alluded to the work that you're doing at Carma. In terms of the here and now, can you just give some of our listeners and viewers who aren't aware of the organization and the work that you're doing just a bit of a flavor?
Absolutely. So Carma with a C, is short for Carbon Karma. We partner deeply with companies to take climate action in the UK and overseas, and we support veterans in the UK on their transition, service leavers on their transition to civilian street, and veterans with mental health and rehousing support. So it's climate action that supports UK veterans. 4 years, we're a B Corp, a social enterprise. We've got some tier one clients. We're really excited about what the future holds.
You've got two really worthy intentions there at the heart of the work that you do in terms of supporting veterans and obviously climate action. Can you just briefly explain for my simple brain, like how it works?
When I first started the business, it was as a direct result of a connection from the Royal Navy Rugby League captain when I played for the Royal Navy, a guy called Andy Steele. And I knew that 20 years ago he'd moved out to Bangkok when he left the Royal Navy. And I was talking to him. It was COVID. It was Zoom. His background was blurred. And he said, and I don't know if you remember, Charlie, but everyone had the background blurred during COVID so that no one could see the kitchen or the spare bedroom in the background. And I'm looking around him and said, Andy, you used to live in Bangkok, mate? Because I knew we'd gone to Bangkok and started the Plant a Tree Today Foundation planting trees. And he went, no, I've moved from Bangkok back to Hull. I said, let me stop you. You've moved from Bangkok back to Hull. I said, why would you do that? They only invented Hull to make Barnsley look like Las Vegas. And he started.
Outrageous.
And then he started laughing. He said, well, very funny, Lofty. He calls me Lofty. He's 6'2", I'm 5'7" and a bit. He said, very funny, Lofty. I had to come home at some point. He said, but I'm still planting trees. He said, I've started the Green Task Force. And the Green Task Force provides positive pathways to veterans and service leavers through nature-based tasks. He said, you won't get this, Lofty, but 10% of all service leavers struggle to find employment in year one, and a further 15% need a hand up, not a hand out, in the first 2 years. I went, let me stop you, Andy. Why wouldn't I know that? And he said, well, you've done all right, Lofty. I said, Andy, I've done all right now, but the first 4 years of leaving the Royal Navy for me were really tough. I went back home to Barnsley, which hadn't moved on much since the late 80s. It was very high male unemployment, and I really struggled to resettle. And what I hadn't realised at the time, that I was missing three things: my forces family, my purpose, and my identity. And I really started to unravel quite quickly. Buying a town centre pub was potentially not the best decision I ever made as a 30-year-old single man. It was certainly a lesson in economics. And Andy said, he said, You're going to love what I'm about to say, Jim. He said, I've sat at the Green Task Force and we provide positive pathways to employment for veterans and service leavers through nature-based tasks. Some of the guys and girls that we work with have got PTSD and we treat them with nature-based therapy. Everyone gets a vocational qualification in horticulture as a bare minimum. And then we work with employers to get them back on the employment path. Well, as soon as he said nature-based therapy, I've always been a massive fan of the outdoors. I was brought up on a small holding in North Yorkshire, and it was just something clicked. It was, I'm thinking, wow, you've got veterans, you've got the outdoors, you've got doing good together for the environment. There's something in this. And I just said, Andy, I'm going to create a digital platform in the UK, and I'm going to connect businesses and consumers to afforestation and reforestation projects all around the globe. But in the UK, I'm going to work with you and veterans, specifically in the Royal Navy. My first ship, it was a damage control exercise. HMS Manchester had been on board for 2 days. We were off the coast of Portland in a very stormy sea, working up, ready to go out to the first Gulf War. The ship was I'm not going to say it's flooded, but there was water in the ship where we'd had charged fire hoses, and we were tasked with tidying the ship up after this damage control exercise. And I'm pulling this cable, which must have weighed about 60 kilograms, down this flat to get it back up and stow it. And all of a sudden, this cable got lighter. And I turned around and there was this leading hand and he was huge. He got muscles on muscles and he picked the other end of this cable up and he helped me stow it up on the bulkhead, make sure it was secure for sea. And he said, why didn't you ask for help? I said, well, to be honest, leading hand, I'm petrified of you. And he went and he shook his head. He put his hand on my shoulder. He said, we're here to help one another, not to stitch one another up. And that changed my life. And I carried that ethos all the way through my Royal Navy journey. I took it into the business. I just get a real thrill out of helping others on their journey. And I think it makes life such a better place. And it's so good for the soul, helping others on.
The impact of having a goal and a vision for what you individually as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, the thing that you're trying to achieve, if that is a worthy goal, it's amazing what resilience that then provides you with in terms of the difficulties that you have to go through when creating something and building something. And
absolutely, I love what we do in Carma and the way that it's transpired over the last 4 years. But there's not one moment when I wake up in the morning that I'm not excited to swing my legs out of bed, get up and attack another day, because every day that we're working, we're making impact. We're making impact for the planet, restoring woodlands and hedgerows in the UK and mangroves throughout the world, kelp in Canada. But more importantly, the residual benefits of that. We give 3% of all of our gross revenue to the Standing Tall Foundation, which provides mental health counselling for veterans. And for every 1,000 trees, we fund a day's resettlement for a service leaver to get them in green sector jobs. So it's just inspirational what we're doing, because doing good makes you feel good.
Indeed. And we'll definitely be linking to the Carma website so people can go and check out all the various sort of things that you guys are involved in, which obviously all sound fantastic. Now, Jim, if possible, let's move forward and let's just introduce the article that you and I are going to be dissecting today. I think what's fascinating is just even like hearing your experience and that sense of purpose that you now have in your work and in your life more broadly. It's going to be really interesting to unpick this in light of that. So if you wouldn't mind just providing a little bit of an introduction and summary of the piece for our listeners and viewers, and then perhaps just picking out from it whatever you thought was most interesting in it.
Absolutely. So after service, the hidden costs of Britain's military on its veterans. A fascinating article, a real good read. I'm not a detail man, but I stuck it through, Charlie, and it was really, really interesting. And I left the services in 2001, so we're talking 25 years ago since I left. You wouldn't believe it looking at me, would you?
I was going to say it.
But what really stood out for me was the age groups that were affected the most. Now, I was 30 years old when I left the Navy, and it said that people who are leaving before they're 25 tend to get more lost. And the struggle, despite there being a lot of help out there for people, the struggle to find the help that they need. There's a lot of things that have been set up in legislation, Armed Forces Covenant. There's a plethora of military charities, but people struggle to find help. And I thought that was really, really interesting to read that, Charlie.
I think it does also allude to in the article, essentially, I mean, I'm going to overly summarizing perhaps, but it essentially says like our system is fundamentally disjointed, perhaps bloated, perhaps not like particularly well thought through. There's not a lot of like joined up thinking essentially. And then it compares that with, I think, the Canadian system, which is very much that kind of, I think they've got like a case management system when it comes to individual veterans and how they go about being managed so that they can track and understand the experience that, you know, individual veterans are going through. And it's less kind of self-serve and more kind of proactive. Is it just as simple when addressing this issue as going, well, let's learn from the Canadians and adopt something similar? Or am I oversimplifying things?
No, it's exactly what we should be doing, Charlie. There should be a wrap around every service leaver that comes out of the UK. But of course, that's under-resourced and underfunded, which is a huge blocker. So the financial dynamics of that, in my opinion, is what's prohibiting it. So really interestingly, the conversation I was having with Andy Steele, the former Royal Navy Rugby League captain, was a precursor to us getting together with other former Royal Navy Rugby League players. And we formed a charity called In Touch Royal Navy Rugby League. And In Touch is built on three pillars: reset, reconnect, and relive. And the core purpose: reset, helping people reset their brains once they've left the Royal Navy, once they've stopped playing rugby league for the Royal Navy. Reconnect, speaking to your old teammates, making sure they're all right. And relive, we get together once or twice a year, have a meal, have a game of Masters rugby. Obviously, we can't play contact rugby anymore. But the whole premise of it is helping people on that journey and identifying people prior to them leaving service and making sure they land on 2 feet in Civilian Street. So it's a little bit of a wraparound, looking out for one another, reaching out and making sure everyone's okay, and creating a community post-service.
Can I, and that sounds brilliant. And again, I think the article like alludes to the fact that in the UK, we have a system where essentially we rely heavily on the third sector, charities, etc., that are there to offer the support to veterans. And that there's almost like a slight void of leadership and responsibility. Who's responsible for this? Like, well, who takes charge of it? And again, the Canadian example suggests that actually it's the forces themselves that need to take charge, I believe, the way that it's positioned, of the veterans' experience and have that kind of hand-holding.
Absolutely. And things are changing. It has surprised me. I mean, over the last 25 years since I left, it was a case of when I left the Navy, hand your gas mask in, call up your ID card, walk through the gate, it is what your pension rights are, and we'll see you later. Things have changed dramatically in the UK, and they're getting better. The problem is navigating that when you leave. We've now got Veterans Minister Louise Sander-Jones. He used to be Al Khan's, who then got a promotion. So we have got someone in the cabinet who is looking out for veterans. That's a real positive step forward, Charlie. But again, what Louise needs to do is consolidate all that help and support that's out there and make sure that people aren't confused, that they're picking up on the right signals and they're getting the right signposts. However, when you're young, even when you're not young, right, you think you know everything. You think you know best. Pride and ego takes over, and you think, and you're taught in the forces to puff your chest out and get on with it, no matter how adverse the situation gets. But the difference from being in the armed forces, there's a whole support network. I talk about forces family. There's a whole support network above you that is largely invisible. that's there to make sure that your welfare is at the heart of everything you do, that you're fed, that you're in the right uniform, you know where you've got to be, when you've got to be there. And everywhere you go, every unit, every ship that you turn up to, you're the subject matter expert. You've been trained to within an inch of your life. And then you leave. And this is the difficult transition. Every decision from the minute you get out of bed to the minute you go to bed that night becomes your own. And that is the hardest thing to reconcile in your mind, Charlie.
When I think of like success in the armed forces, I'm thinking of somebody like yourself, being in for an extended period of time. I'm thinking lots of nice medals across the chest here. That's the vision, if you like, of a successful career, presumably in the armed forces. If people leave early, they've got to deal with perhaps that sense of disappointment around failing. Is that something that affects, you think, those younger leavers as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not really talking from experience, but my perception would be that you go from a really structured environment with a real clear career path in front of you to choosing to leave. And let's think back to our early 20s. We thought we knew everything, but emotionally we weren't very mature. There was always that you could. Yeah, exactly. Don't dwell on that too much, Charlie.
It's horrible.
But I think that's what it comes down to: emotional maturity, the expectation, and everybody else looking at you thinking that you've failed when you haven't really. I know some people who have left the Navy 8 years in. Fast forward 25 years, they're managing directors of huge defence companies in the UK, and they'll say flippantly, "Well, I only did 8 years," as though it's a sign of, because I know you did a lot more. Well, staying in doesn't particularly mean you've done more. And getting out very early, again, I was speaking to Royal Marines captain who said, I did 5 years. I did it as a stepping stone into financing the city. So horses for courses. The armed forces aren't for everyone. And getting out early, these are the people that, obviously, reading the article, that we need to put a better wrap around it and keep an eye on, because they're more vulnerable. And I always say one of my big things is veterans aren't vulnerable, they're valuable. But what they need is a purpose. You would think that employing a veteran, you're going to get someone that's loyal, that's committed, that's courage, has got discipline, has got standards. And that's exactly what you get. And I think there's a real opportunity to educate hiring managers that's what you get when you're employing a veteran.
What do you think are the sort of preconceived ideas that hiring managers and heads of HR have about veterans that stop them from valuing them as they might do? Like, what are the things, what are the other issues that the people have about employing veterans?
I think there's a lot of noise in the media about the negative effects of being in the armed forces, and less noise about the positive effects of being in the armed forces. When you leave, you're highly adaptable, highly resilient, and very engaging. I think a lot of hiring managers might feel threatened, but because they've never been in that environment, and think, if I bring him in here, he might want to take over, have that job. Veterans love to be led. They love structure, and discipline. So where you perceive someone as a threat, the loyalty that you will command off that person is almost immediate.
Do you get a sense? Sorry, Jim, this is a question that goes like a little bit off topic, but do you get a sense that we're like collectively as a people sort of losing sight of what hard work actually looks like? Do you think we're becoming a bit soft in that sense?
Absolutely. I mean, and we've created these artificial environments. 400 years ago, we were living in the woods. Now we've got towns, cities, villages, but you get people back into the natural environment, grafting on a tree planting day, and the change in them, Charlie, is tangible. Getting them out of that office, at first, everyone's a little bit pensive. They don't know what. An hour in, contact with the earth, contact planting trees. They literally are different people, more robust, more engaged, more. So all the noise, all the signals we get on a daily basis, public transport, officers, the media that's baking your head, it's just conditioning you to be something that you're not naturally. Get out into nature for a day and your whole persona changes. The way you open up with each other, the way you communicate, the way you feel inside. I always say it's so spiritual being out on the soil.
Love it, Jim. Well, look, I think having had a whistle-stop tour through, if you like, the issues that veterans are sort of confronted with, and perhaps our slightly broken system that looks to support them. I think the pitch of giving veterans a chance and the value that veterans can bring to the organisations that we operate, I think is a really strong message. I want to now conclude, Jim, if possible, with the magic wand. I'm fascinated to see what you're going to do with this. If I was to hand you a magic wand, Jim, and you could change one thing about the commercial world this instant, what would that one thing be?
People see climate action and social value as a cost in business. On a personal level, I see it as a price that we've never had to pay before. Never before has it been so important to bake into your business practices, doing good, helping people out and helping the environment. People make the distinction of the human race and nature. We're all one and we all need to work together to unravel the problems we've caused. If you can bake taking climate action and helping people into your business, you've got two solutions in one. Not only will it be great for your business because you will endear your customers to buy more product, to trust you, but also your employees, because doing good makes you feel good.
Jim, that's been a brilliant conversation. I really enjoyed picking that a little bit with you. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Been an absolute pleasure, Charlie. Thanks very much.
And that's all for today's episode of The Responsible Edge. A big thank you to Jim Holland for joining me on today's show. As a reminder, this episode was brought to you by TrueMark, the mark of trusted sustainability communications. Visit truemark.com to learn more. I'm Charlie Martin. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. See you next time.